As the title of this video should indicate, I am going to be describing the dark aspects of the light aspect, as well as the light aspect of the light aspect. And on the inverse quality, the light aspect of the dark aspect, as well as the dark aspect of the dark aspect. And so the way I'm going to go about this is differently than you might commonly hear the term light and darkness. You might be watching these videos and they're saying your light exposes other people's darkness, right? And, in and of itself, that might be truth, but it's not the full embodiment of what light versus darkness really is. To start out, I'm going to be describing light. Light can be equated with purity, sure. But the reason light can be equated with purity is because pure light is truth for what it is. Truth is on the highest level of the playing field, so to speak. And what light does is accentuate the truth of the situation, right? And that leads to a form of darkness within the light, that light can actually develop itself. It's not the same as darkness in and of itself for what darkness is, but there is a dark aspect to that which is light, and it still has to do with truth. And that comes in the form of existential doubts. For example, you might be a person of light and believe in the truth and do things according to making the truth known and being of honest character and things like this, right? It can extend as far as good works and even healing. But the darkness of that aspect of light, like I said, comes in the form of existential doubt or doubts. You might have everything going for you in terms of the light part of the equation, but something that might be holding you back is, can I do this? Was I meant to do this? Am I doing this correctly? Is there a better way I could be doing this? These are the darker aspects of the light versus dark ratio. Once the light starts merging closer to that borderline where darkness starts to reside, there's sort of a foreshadowing of what it is to go too far into that realm, and so in order to avoid darkness, the light side of things actually uses its own form of darkness, right? And darkness is an inverse quality of light. And so it is polar opposite, right? So that also means that darkness has a light aspect. And so what darkness embodies to me, like true darkness, is lies. Light is truth, darkness is lies. And the progression of darkness towards the light aspect of the darkness phase is actually achieving worse and worse acts upon humanity. It's a progression scale of criminality, essentially. So the light aspect of the darkness that is symbolized in dishonesty is sort of this overwhelming honesty with yourself, with how corrupt you have become. And it keeps you planted there in the darkness permanently. The darkness aspect of the light and the light aspect of the darkness does the same thing for its own side. The existential doubts of the light aspect brings you closer back to the light, and the light aspect of the darker aspect, or the darkness aspect, brings you closer back to the darkness, right? And this is well symbolized in something like the yin and the yang. There's the light side, and it's got the little seed of darkness, and then there's the dark side, and it's got the little seed of light, right? And the idea is like, imagine it rotating, right? It's kind of like two dogs chasing each other's tails, so to speak. Like that sort of dynamic, right? It's this circular continuation of light versus dark. It's also somewhat symbolized in Egyptian mythology. There was the god that killed the one other god during the night, and that brought the darkness of night. But then the other god would rise again and kill the other god bringing about the daylight, right? And so, each god is sort of like the light aspect of the dark and the dark aspect of the light. And, they bring each other down to accentuate the other side, right? And so, and there's this personal receding back to the original form to come back more triumphant each time, right? And so, where does that type of mental image lead? It leads one to believe that, like, the battle between dark and light is infinite, is never ending, right? It's this cyclical motion that just occurs throughout time and space. And to look at things that way is somewhat self-defeating. The light does not always fall to the darkness. And, although the darkness may not always fall to the light, it more inevitably falls to itself upon exposure or overexposure to the light. And so, the light is still a more formidable foe than the darkness in terms of that. There's only so many ways of looking at it that way, but that's the truth. The like a person of light has a different interpretation of what darkness is than what darkness does, and darkness has a different interpretation of what light is compared to what light does, right? And so, when a lie is shed light upon, there's typically an amount of guilt associated with that, right? But when truth is shed darkness upon, there's an amount of doubts that occur, but there's still that light glow of truth, just like at the surface, and in terms of darkness coming to terms with the light, there's an amount of guilt associated with that, but there's an open door, and that's a chance for the darkness to transform into light, right? But sometimes, depending on the darkness of the being, they just paint it black. They just paint it dark, right? They say, like, I'm going to block that from myself so that I can get like this far in my darkness, right? And that is where it turns into an evil that is self-consuming, right? And that only leads to a destructive path, right? And the light, you can also face a similar trial to becoming a being of pure light. You don't want to do any unintended damage. And as they say, the truth hurts, right? And so, if you are a being of light, you might understand that there's still overwhelming amounts of knowledge, right? And to avoid harm unto others is a light aspect, right? It's adhering to the truth of the moment still, because more than likely no one wants to get harmed in anything that they're doing, right? And so adhering to that factor is of the light, right? And if you come to your existential doubts and you say, I'm going to ensure that this is completely blocked out, then you become overwhelmed with the knowledge of what is. And, that's essentially taking it too far, right? And you will inevitably want to undo it in the end. And, that's the difference between light and darkness is a trap that keeps you in the darkness if you feed yourself just the darkness, right? Whereas the light, if you feed yourself just the light, there actually becomes a need for at least a shadow to provide contrast to the reality that you're living in, right? So that you can keep things realistic and so that you can maintain a truthful quality of life and not just be saying things that, shoves everybody else out of the way and keeps you entrained in that reality, but does no good for anyone else. You see? And so, light shares, darkness possesses. Light is generous, darkness is greed. There's all sorts of contrasts like that. The most common understanding of light versus dark is that light is truth and darkness is deception. And to continually deceive yourself and deceive others is to follow an inevitable trajectory towards complete darkness of your being, at which point you are unsalvageable. And to be as truthful as you can with anybody is, including yourself, is an inevitable trajectory towards enlightenment, is an inevitable journey towards manifestation of your goals and different spiritual success in your life. It brings a greater sense of gratitude in those moments. It brings appreciation of what you do have, and a lesser concern for that which you lack or simply do not have, right? There's an aspect to this that keeps things going on a congruent level, right? And unfortunately, there are some who are lost to the darkness. And the only thing that the light can do is shed more light on the darkness, right? And the darkness will always recede farther and farther into itself as more and more darkness, right? And eventually there will be such a collapse of darkness under its own possession of self that the only thing that will remain is this sharp contrast of life versus that which was life. It will be a new life one day. One day, the light will outshine the darkness that continually absorbs the light to try to transmute it into something more negative constantly, right? Eventually, the darkness will run out of time to do so under its own pressures. And that is where it will inevitably give out. So, to those who are listening that are on either side, you know which you are. That's all that matters in the end. It's not about the politics of it. It's not about the logistics. It's simply, are you a being of light or are you a being of darkness, right? And there is an in-between. And in between is where there is this natural buoyancy that can allow one to gain equilibrium in the landscape, right? And so it's not to say that neutrality is the end all and be all of the entire situation, but neutrality is a solution to those of you who feel trapped in the darkness. There is another option for you, but it's not to jump straight to the light. It's to start practicing neutral truths, just neutral facts about things, just focus on reality for what it is. Stop overlaying your own narrative onto things. Stop projecting onto others. Stop deflecting responsibility for your own actions. And, these things will start to come together, right? But if you perpetually block that off, one day it's going to cut itself off from you. That is the unfortunate truth. It's a dangerous reality that way. And, it takes a different kind of person to go that far, so I'm not saying like it can happen to anybody, but I'm saying that it can happen. And I'm saying that anybody can bring themselves to the knowledge of what it is to be that far. And that is knowledge that is typically better avoided, which is why I am selective about how I share that portion of knowledge with people, because it gets way too deep into all the aspects. It's what you would call too much information. It's it's things that are inappropriate. It's things that are vile and disgusting. It's things that are violent and graphic in nature, and it's adhering to all of this as a lifestyle and embodying it in your spirit for who you are, and this concept within your mind that you're invincible despite all of the suffering you're inevitably causing yourself in the end once you decidedly burn out from it all. And, if you follow the path of light, you shine light on those instances. It's like seeing a clear warning sign, like this will lead to my certain demise. I'm going to stay away from that. So you shine the light elsewhere, right? And there's no way around it that way. You just are on one path or you are on the other path, and to convert to one path from the other is sort of indicative that you always were one rather than the other. It's just a part of your soul, how you started out, right? Like some people are born into the light. Other people are born into the darkness, right? And, either side of things can cross over to the other aspect, right? And so, a person could grow up in an entirely abusive family, learning about dark aspects of life their entire childhood, and then grow up like being somewhat rebellious and, like deviant in nature, so to speak, and still come out in the end as a being of light because that's who they always truly were. You know, they were struggling within themselves. That's why they were doing these things differently, right? And you know, a person can be born into, you know, a completely spiritual family and, you know, be raised according to virtuous moral values and, you know, like learn about sharing is caring and all these types of things, right? And love thy neighbor as thyself and everything like that. And they could, you know, go down a path that gets progressively darker and darker, like crimes, like violence, going to jail, like on a repeat basis, you know, just like never ending trouble that they are causing and, you know, like causing themselves in the end, right? Because that's who they always truly were at their core. You know, and you know, there's other areas in between too, like where a person can go down that sort of path and appear that way, you know, but then they get one last chance, so to speak, to like, you know, cross back over to where they came from, you know, like, you know, this is where you came from. Do you want this or do you want where you are now, right? And, you know, a person can choose their original roots once again, you know, but like at that point, then you've really gone too far, so to speak. Like if you, like, you can't go any farther than that without it being a repeat mistake, right? And so I think that's the concept behind getting three chances. You know, the first chance is, you know, the inevitable, like this is what you were born into, right? The second chance is, you know, this is your opportunity for change from what you were born into. The third chance is, okay, now you've made it this far with what you've been given. I am now offering you, like the universe is now offering you an opportunity to go back from whence you came, right? But that's your three chances. There's no fourth chance. Like there's like the fourth chance is death. You know, there is no other option beyond those three chances, right? And so you know, it may or may not be derivative of that sort of aspect of light versus dark, but that's how I see it. That's how I translate it. That's how I interpret it. That's my philosophy of the ontology of the expression, right? And to wrap things up, it is it's a enlightening process on either side of things. The darkness can become enlightened to sink itself back further into darkness, or that which is darkness can bring itself to the light to reach further enlightenment towards the path of true light. And that is the ultimate enlightening process, right? And so that's somewhat my summary is there is a darkness to the light and there is a light to the darkness. And that little seed of light and dark on either side of things is what gives us hope. I know I did a video a short while ago calling hope a four-letter word, but I did clarify in that video that hope in and of itself is a good thing. You know, it is to proclaim that which you hope for that is more of hope as a four-letter word. You don't want to hope that you are going to achieve this or get that, or that this is going to go the right way. You just have to know that hope is there. You know, to speak it aloud is sort of to diffuse it, right? It's to kind of neutralize its energy, which in turn situationally is a more negative consequence than allowing hope to simply be, right? And so just a clarification on that, and to re-summarize, the darkness of the light and the light of the darkness is what creates a neutral border between either or, and it's what gives us a chance for transformation and change in the world for the better.